Welcome to the Decentralized Consciousness Podcast. Today on the podcast, I have Mr. Jake Woodhouse. Jake, how you doing this morning?
I'm very, very well, Caleb. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation because you had a podcast called Bitcoin with Jake, and I felt like I really connected with you and your curiosity on that podcast. And I think that it sounds like it has really led you down quite a spiritual rabbit hole as well. So maybe let's begin by talking a little bit about the podcast, your Bitcoin journey, and probably more specifically, your spiritual journey.
Cool. Okay. As with all great questions at the start of what will be a awesome conversation, I can think of multiple different directions to go in. So let me just take a moment. Okay. So the project that was Bitcoin with Jake was a big one in many ways. It started in October. When was it? I mean, just the whole Bitcoin story. I might as well start there. I mean, bought my first Bitcoin in 2015, sold some in 2016, sold some more in 2017. Managed to hold on about 25% of what I first bought through to then it was 2020, and all the COVID lockdowns were happening, and inflation was pumping, and the Fed prints all this money. Michael Saylor comes out and says, I've actually just bought $300 million worth of Bitcoin instead of owning cash on my balance sheet as a stock listed company. And boom, that was just this massive moment in my life as a private investor. I saw that and I'm like, this is huge. Having, Bitcoin being a small part of my portfolio before that moment. And that kicked off this just huge dive down the rabbit hole. And along that journey, I've come across so many different subjects that I never expected to be discussing. And it is very spiritual. The entire process, in hindsight, has become more spiritual with time. Bitcoin with Jake came out of a few different experiences. But really, anyone that starts learning about Bitcoin and they get the bug and they start chatting to their friends and family about it, and they want to go out and talk about it. And I was already writing a newsletter, and I was like, actually, I really want to do a podcast. And I'd had a experience where with two friends, we ran a YouTube channel. It was called We're So Bloody Early. And they were a bit more into altcoins, and I was more into just the Bitcoin stuff. And I realized when we were hosting guests, you'd have 4 people on a call. It was just too much. I wanted to do one-on-one conversations. So Bitcoin with Jake was born. I even remember I had so many different names that I was thinking through, and eventually just like Bitcoin with Jake is so simple. It's like, okay, get the handle for that, get the .com for that. And yeah, shout out to Knut Svanholm. He was my first ever guest on the pod for joining me. And that was April of 2022. And over the consequent 12 months, I did about 80 episodes. Each was roughly an hour. And I spoke with people all across the world, different ages, different backgrounds, who had adopted Bitcoin in a meaningful way. And it was just an awesome experience learning how to produce a podcast properly, how to host a conversation, when to talk, when just to listen, when to crack a joke, to get things wrong as well, like, not having the microphone switched on in one interview, for example. But really what that project became is a due diligence process on what Bitcoin is. And it allowed me to make a significant investment myself, because I looked at all these people. It's like, this is just too much to ignore. They're all bringing different things to the table, but understand why Bitcoin's valuable, and I just so happen to be lucky enough to be asking them all these questions. If I don't follow this and put my money where my mouth is, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Anyway, here we are in February of 2024, really 4 years after that kind of 2020 aha moment. And, we're very nearly back at the all-time high in US dollar terms for Bitcoin price. And it's just an unbelievable moment. And Bitcoin with Jake enabled me to be in a position now where I just feel so comfortable, calm, relaxed, wealthy, and excited about the future, because I can start to explore other areas of my life, such as the spiritual side of things. And I'll make a shout out to Sama Cathro. What an absolute fucking legend. Sama was someone that I came across on Bitcoin Twitter. He was tagged in a comment of mine when I was looking for meditation advice or something. I can't remember how. And I got Sama on the pod, and he started talking about how the Bitcoin network was actually a decentralized community of spirits. Each node was like a soul. And he taught me through his spiritual journey. And I just was like, what the hell? Who is this guy? And the idea of living with intuition alone, and not ignoring the rational mind, but just like there was another way of approaching life. And yeah, since that conversation, Sam and I have become friends and done a bunch of coaching. And Caleb, now we're talking more closely. And here I am on the Decentralized Consciousness podcast. So yes, Bitcoin with Jake was a platform of deep research that has led me in lots of different directions. And so a wonderful starting point for this conversation. Thank you, Caleb.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. There's something to do with creation, with making something, with doing something, that it gives you the doors that it opens, right? When you are able to explore and create something out of pure passion and curiosity, what's able to do for you, the people you meet, and the expansion, here with this community, you would probably refer to that process as raising one's consciousness. And if you are subscribed to Remember to Breathe, I just wrote an article that kind of goes into this in detail, which is, the cycles of creation. Sometimes we feel like exploring curiosity, and sometimes we feel like building something for no other reason than we just want to do it. And it sounds to me like the Bitcoin with Jake podcast was very much based in that for you. And because you were following an intention of basically higher consciousness, an intention to just create and discover and learn more, the doors that it opened for you were incredibly expansive. And I think that's what Bitcoin is doing for people all the time, because the Bitcoin rabbit hole very much is that. It's when the Bitcoin rabbit hole opened up for me, I was just blown away by what the hell is this? Kind of like what you said. So what is this? And the nature of it being so different and unique, but also just like this, there was just this natural pull to want to learn more. And I think that is so expansive to every Bitcoiner who goes through all that.
Yeah, it's like an onion slowly being peeled. As you peel one, something else appears beneath it, and you're like, oh, what's this next bit? And it's funny, when I reflect on Bitcoin with Jake, it was, I really desperately wanted to be part of what Bitcoin was. I saw, for example, Peter McCormack and what Bitcoin did. And I'm like, hang on a second. So this guy travels the world talking to people about Bitcoin and gets paid really well for it. What a fucking legend. And I listened to like a ton of his episodes, and it taught me so much about what Bitcoin is. And love him or hate him, it's still like, it's an interesting piece of inspiration. And then I came across other voices in the space that I started to kind of lean towards. And then I started to create even a following of my own. People were listening. You know, I looked through some of the listener stats, and there's people all over the world that have listened to Bitcoin with Jake content. It's quite extraordinary. In countries you've basically never heard of, you've touched someone somewhere. And you know, I was really confident at one point that Bitcoin with Jake was going to be the project that I would create really good income from, and it would be like my career. And so in some ways there was a sense of, I'm doing this because I want to do it and nothing else matters. But then there was also a commercial drive for it. And through that, I learned so much about content creation and how you can use organic content to market products and services, and what you can charge people as sponsors. So I had a handful of, you know, business to business sponsorship contracts that I created. And I mean, it was a lot of work for not very much money, frankly. But still, it was in some ways, as you say, the creative process that was so fascinating about it. And it did open doors. Funnily enough, I don't think I'd be on this call right now had it not been for that podcast and that project. I mean, of course I wouldn't. I wouldn't have ever reached out and spoken to Sammer, and then I wouldn't have continued to become friends with him. Ironically, I stopped Bitcoin with Jake in April of 2023 in favor of following an opportunity that my friend and mentor at the time brought to my table to start a business. And so I jumped into business with two people, and I was creating a company that people in the Bitcoin space might have heard of called the Bitcoin Advisor. And I was the guy that was brought in as an equity partner to build out the organic content there. And I have a mini series of, I think, 6 or 8 episodes you can still find on Spotify and Apple called the Bitcoin Advisor podcast. And in September of 2023, I got cancelled after an appearance on Bitcoin Sessions Why Are We Bullish show, where I'd shared some internal metrics of the business that Peter Dunworth, in particular, my business partner, or ex-business partner, took huge offense to. And I received a couple of emails and a couple of angry phone calls 48 hours after my podcast appearance, and I was actually removed from the business. I was kicked out of the emails and gone, finished. And so that experience actually is what led me back to Sammer in a meaningful way. He came on my podcast, Bitcoin with Jake. I joined the Decentralized Consciousness podcast not quite 12 months ago, and then this business I joined blew up. So when you talk about like a creative process taking you to new places, opening doors, it does that, absolutely. But sometimes it opens doors that you don't expect. I did not see my friend and mentor betraying me in the way that they did, and that, you know, I reached out to Sammer at the time. I was like, I've got to go and get a chat with this guy Sammer. I feel like he can help me here, because he'd mentioned about living with no fear, and there was so much fear in the scenario I found myself in, where, you know, a podcast appearance was enough to like harpoon your business relationship forever. Get rid of him. He's a liability, this guy. Just absolutely ridiculous behavior. So yes, it's a really cool thing to reflect on, because we don't know where it's going to take us, these inspirations. And yes, it's cool to think where the decentralized podcast might go, Caleb. I'm very excited for you as you really ease into this new project.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, when it comes to creating from a higher intention, there's a level of neutrality and almost like disconnect to the outcome It's quite literally doing something for the process, being interested in the process and not the outcome. And because the laws of karma are, it's a very interesting model, because effectively it's very aligned with like the law of attraction, if you're familiar with that. And effectively what karma or the law of attraction tells us is that whatever you put out, you get back, in the same way. Whatever you're getting back, it resonates with the original intention. So if the original intention is to, let's say, earn a bunch of money so that you can be comfortable, right? So I want to be comfortable, I want to be happy, I want to be able to enjoy my life. And so I feel like the only way that I can do that is to earn a bunch of money. What will happen is, and everybody gets to experience the karmic version of those intentions differently. Some people get that. Some people get the money. Some people struggle. Some people don't get the money. But at the end of the day, the result of what they receive, it resonates with their intention. So, in those cases where, you get a career and you're very successful and you get a bunch of money, your retirement accounts build up at the end of your life. And you can ask a lot of people who, go through this journey. They say, am I happy? Am I truly happy? When they go within and they look back and they analyze their status, and if they achieved what they were actually aiming to achieve, they'll find that it was never enough. It was never enough. It's like, how can I have worked so hard all of my life to try to do this thing? And I feel like I'm still trying, like I'm still trying to be happy. I'm still trying to be comfortable. And the money didn't actually do that. In fact, I have all of this money and now I feel even more uncomfortable because I'm not in the same routine that I was. I don't have the same clout within society that I had before. So not only do I feel like I'm not doing something now, but I'm feeling almost less comfortable because I don't have the same status that I did in my career. And with that, I guess it's the intention that just, it comes back around, right? So you have the intention of higher consciousness, curiosity, the intention of experiencing process. It's more neutral, because if it's truly just a curiosity, if it's truly just, hey, what's behind this door, it doesn't matter what's behind the door, it doesn't matter the outcome. And so you're truly just doing it to experience that thing, and experience it almost in the now, right? It's like living in the present moment. You hear so much about, when you experience higher consciousness and meditate, you hear a lot about, don't worry about the future, don't dwell upon the past, just feel what's going on in your body right now. And that is what that's what genuine curiosity is, I think.
It's so cool, isn't it? So many things have happened to me actually lately that resonate very strongly with this. Um, the first point to make is um, the way that my business friendship with the Bitcoin advisor ended so abruptly and was was coordinated. It came from such a deep place of fear. It's like somehow the comments I'd made were a threat to those people's like careers and life and money. Like I'd said something so inexcusable that it was the end of the world from them. And it came from just this extraordinary place of fear. And I would argue in hindsight that the business has been built purely to flip very soon. You know, the moment they can sell it to someone, they will. And so it's not built from a true place of inspiration, creativity, and curiosity, as you so eloquently described. And hence, the founders of the business are willing to treat people in the way that they did. And on the flip side to that, I just this week have been approached by two people building another business that is very, very similar to that in terms of product and the problem that it's solving and the market that it's going to enter. Ironically, one of the business partners is Ben from Bitcoin Sessions, who had hosted me on the infamous podcast that got me cancelled. And they're building something very similar. But his business partner approached me this week saying, you know, that he'd followed my story with Bitcoin with Jake. He really liked the style of my podcast, The Bitcoin Advisor, and they're building a similar offering. And would I be interested to, you know, get involved from an equity perspective and build out the Australian and Asian focused part of their business? And this was an opportunity that I didn't seek at all. It literally, like in some senses, I manifested it. You know, I drew it towards me. And the reason I'm interested in building it is not to make lots of money necessarily. It's because I really don't see a good level of consultancy business within the Bitcoin space that when someone comes to me and says, oh, I want to put $500,000 into Bitcoin, how do I do it? Well, I can say, here's all the things that you might do to get there, but you've got to learn it all yourself. And there's a bunch of things that you might get wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to be able to say, look, just call this guy. I know him well. I'm actually one of the business owners. They'll help you set up all of the transactions you need to make, a multi-sig wallet with self-custody and an inheritance protocol, and it'll be a consultancy fee, and you're done. And what's really fun about this, and what you highlighted so nicely, is the intention behind an action, i.e., what's behind that door. If it doesn't really matter what's behind the door, then the outcome doesn't matter, right or wrong. But if it's like, I'm hunting for a pot of gold and it must be behind that door, let's look, and it's not there, then the vibration, the energy, the frequency that comes from it's so different, isn't it? Disappointment, regret, fear, anger, frustration. And so, yes, I'm still very, very early on this spiritual journey, and this idea that Sam has helped to plant in my head of living with no fear. What the hell what's he talking about? Is that possible? How do I do that? But this idea that you can attract things into your life that you want to work on. Like, I've had other ideas that are genuinely from a place of inspiration that I struggle to have the self-belief to follow. So one example is a brand and a name that I've had filtering around, which is called The Allocation. And I want to have regular long-form conversations such as we're having now with people that have adopted a Bitcoin standard, that are, kind of professional level investors that continue to investigate other investment opportunities alongside, the bulk of their wealth sitting in Bitcoin as a deflationary hard money that is increasing in purchasing power over time and is very easy to look after and low risk. But there are other opportunities to invest in, right? Other equity positions in early stage companies, perhaps, or real estate deals that might outperform Bitcoin. I don't know. But actually, when you live on the Bitcoin standard, the way that you allocate everything changes, not just your capital, but also your time. What is it you want to do with your time? What do you find inspiring? In fact, what if you have solved the wealth problem? And because you've now come across Bitcoin, Bitcoin solves the problem that you were trying to figure out the whole time previous to that, which is doing all this investing work, doing all this business building. What if you suddenly got your whole Monday to Friday 10-hour days back? You've got 50 hours a week to do what you want with. Well, that's very interesting. How do people allocate their time when they have that problem to solve? And that is where you really start to get into, okay, well, if you're not working on something that's really truly coming from a place of passion and curiosity and and flow, I think, as Sama would describe, then the project itself is doomed and you're wasting time. So yes, many things I've touched on there, Caleb, but it's fun, isn't it, when you start to distill experience in your life through these different types of lenses.
I think a lot of Bitcoiners, especially in the coming years, so let's say 1 or 2 cycles, are going to find that they have, just like you said, quote unquote, solved the wealth problem. And for me, I haven't probably, I don't feel like I have solved that in my heart. Like from a higher consciousness standpoint, I feel as though I have a lot of distortions around money, a lot of scarcity patterns. Money is I think it's such a deeply ingrained distortion when it comes to living as a human being, to the point where it probably it probably directs, maybe I would estimate, like 90% of our actions in life. It is to get money. And when I go within myself and I try to figure out what is that genuine passion, that genuine curiosity, it took a lot of time and a lot of frustration to figure out what that would be. Because what I found kept happening is I would find things that I thought I was interested in, but there was still kind of this underlying intention of, can I turn this into money? Can I figure out how to do this thing and ultimately make some money doing it? In fact, with the decentralized consciousness and where it is right now, back in December, I sort of went through a little bit of darkness where I was really struggling with money. And I was like, I don't know what to do here. I know that I want to follow a genuine curiosity, which is for me in spiritual growth, personal growth, but I cannot figure this money aspect out. And so what I actually decided to do was to knowingly give into this lower intention of the fear of, I need to make money. And instead of trying to fight that, instead of fighting this internal battle of, I'm curious about this, but I don't think I can make money doing it, so I'm not going to follow it. Or I couldn't go wholeheartedly into something because there wasn't that possibility of being able to make money. I didn't want to follow it. So with decentralized consciousness, we have now a group of people who facilitate sessions. And that's what you and I have done. And that was like, okay, I can feel comfortable knowing that as I follow my curiosity, as I build more connections with people, as I show people my higher intentions and who I am, I can build, maybe there's the possibility that I can bring in some wealth. And what that has done for me has been also very interesting because, what I'll find is that a lot of times, for instance, when I put out like a remember to breathe, and which is, you know, an article, and I don't get the feedback, or it doesn't seem like a lot of people are reading it, kind of thing. I have like this mixed feeling because I have the intention of, okay, I need to grow this reach. I need to connect more people. But then I also have the curiosity intention where it's like, hey, I was just exploring this topic on my own, and I was just putting down my feelings onto digital paper. I was modeling some of the things that I was exploring in my life. And that to me is also valuable. So I think there's something to be said about exploring a curiosity, but also having knowledge of what your intention is and seeing how it comes back around through karmic cycles as well. And because you can utilize this as a leverage for spiritual growth, for personal growth, to be able to see how these things come back around and see the things that maybe are less comfortable, things that you did enjoy through the process, and for those things that you didn't enjoy, seeing where they came from. Did they come from a lower intention, or was it just the way that it was? Was it just a time? Was it just an outcome? Was it just opening the door and finding that there was no pot of gold on the other side? And how are you feeling about that? Is it, I guess, is what I'm saying, does that resonate with you? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
Hmm. Yeah, so it's really a kind of set of thoughts around what is the creative process. And so on the one hand, we now have an environment in which there are a plethora of different digital platforms which one can utilize to spread their message, spread their story, spread their content. So whether you choose to specialize in audio only or video or short form or long form written, it doesn't matter, right? You've got Medium, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, wherever your weapon of choice might be. And give the specific example, your email. I have your email that you're referring to in my inbox, and I have not yet read it. But let's say you're using a Substack or a ConvertKit. You can see that you sent 100 emails to your email list of 100 people, and you got a 42% open rate. And you can see how many people then forwarded that email onto someone else, or whatever the case might be. You've got a data set there that gives you a snapshot on how well the market received it, so to speak. And let's say you wrote an article every day for a year. At the end of that year, you'd have data sets for the whole period of time that's gone by. And you could start to see, okay, well, that particular newsletter was extremely well received because it got 80% open, or it was really poorly received and only got a 5% open. And you can start to see patterns, right? It's like, okay, well, actually the title can't be more than 3 words long or 2 words long, or you can't send it on a Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. or whatever the nuance might be. You can then flip to other platforms and start to do the same kind of thing, right? With YouTube, you can see, do I YouTube shorts? Do I do long form YouTube? What can the title be? How are the show notes laid out? What's the first 30 seconds of the video? Was it the specific guest? Was it one-to-one conversation that you did, or was it a video tutorial, or you name it, right? And so in some ways, I like the phrase action brings clarity, because you can see what you put out there, what did really well, and you can go, okay, well, we should double down on that. That type of story or that type of content was really successful. Let's create more of that. And all the while, the more eyeballs that you can get, the more attention you can generate. In theory, the more money you can make, right? So whether you're selling, an advert in your newsletter, or you're selling information products alongside your podcast, or whatever the case might be. this, to my mind, this is like the hyper rational kind of organic content world. And essentially it's a free kick, right? You can just hit, 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 hit all day long and just see what comes back. The funny thing is, though, is the flip side to that is just being purely led by intuition. And if you have found something in your life that was particularly challenging, that you overcame through a series of different steps, and it's not really that valuable that you share it, but you just write this brilliant in-depth piece and you go, Boof, this is just, something fun I wanted to share. And you could do the same. You could email every day for a year but never look at the stats, and therefore not take feedback on what worked well, and just follow what comes from inside. What do you want to write about? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to make videos about? And so what we're discussing here is, what is the creative process? What is the right approach? And I, for one, I mean, in some ways, I was so ready for the Bitcoin with Jake project to end. I was so excited to try something new. And part of that was because I'd set unattainable goals, and I was a year into a podcast journey that wasn't making much money. And I was like, brilliant, this new business, the Bitcoin advisor that Pete's bringing me into, that's going to be a better choice. Let's go that way. And you can see straight away, the intention behind that was wrong, right? That was kind of like, it was like they were saving me in some way. It's like, that's not the right foundation for something to grow from. And look at what happened, right? It didn't work out. Surprise, surprise. So one of the things I'm trying to learn and really spend time thinking through these last 6 months is, what do I want to do? What do I find interesting? And I did a bit of work in December pumping out YouTube videos that I was writing, and you write one article that you then narrate into a camera, and that article becomes short form content on Twitter. It becomes a long form newsletter, and it becomes a YouTube and podcast episode. So you're suddenly, one piece of creative work gets plastered all over the internet. And that just didn't feel great. I stopped. And then in January of this year, I did a new thing where I was like, okay, I'm going to wake up every single morning. And, I'm really into something called Noster, which is a decentralized communications protocol that's got lots and lots of potential to replace all sorts of different areas of the internet as it sits today. And I posted an article on Noster every day for 30 days. I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I would just write whatever came to me. I was trying to follow my intuition. And again, I learned a lot from that as well, because inspiration is not consistent. It's sporadic. It happens at different times. So I'd wake up and I'd be there at 5 a.m. sitting there going, what the fuck am I going to write about? And something would come to me and I would get an article out, and, that would be fine. But I suddenly realized I could probably be doing something more valuable with that time, should I choose to cut my sleep short, which is very valuable to me anyway. And so I dropped off that concept. Where's this all going as a conversation? Well, the point is there's a creative process we can follow, and there's lots of different ways you can take things, and that ultimately comes down to the individual. But yes, it's fascinating to think through, like, what is more effective, that kind of hyper rational approach or the more intuitive one?
I think effective is the key word there, because effective would imply, what is
It might be the
the
wrong word, Caleb. That might be the wrong word to use.
well,
Maybe
I don't know that.
creative,
Yeah,
or
well, and yeah, it depends on
inspiring,
what you mean by it.
or
Mm-hmm.
harmonious, or intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, for
Yeah,
example,
because
I
there's
see
a
some people that have they've built themselves really amazing businesses, but they're stuck. They're on a hamster wheel. Actually, Peter McCormack is a great example of this. I don't think he wants to interview people about Bitcoin any longer. I think he's over it. He's done it. He's done it for years. He's built a great business, and he's a bit like, can't be fucking asked to do this any longer. Fair enough, but it's paying the bills, and so he's got to carry on doing it. At which point, the inspiration and creativity and the genuine desire behind it, it suffers. So yeah, maybe effective is the right word. I'm not sure, Caleb. Sorry, I cut you off there because it's a difficult one.
Totally fine. Yeah, what I was going to say is basically what you laid out is effective. Is it effective in the business sense? Is it effective because when the outcome is to earn money, is it effective at doing that? Because I think that's effective means that it's aligned with some outcome. And then you could still use it in terms of connecting with a higher intention or connecting with your node. But harmonious, I think, is probably the correct word when you're trying to connect with your higher self. So that's probably a question that, as people explore these things, as you are trying to figure out when you have solved the wealth problem, when you have a Bitcoin stack that is you're comfortable dipping into for your daily living, it's important to be able to know what effective means to you. Is it effective in earning me money? Is it effective in quelling my fears? Or is it effective or harmonious in connecting with my highest self, connecting with a passion, connecting with a curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a clear answer to that, Caleb, to be honest.
Yeah, this is kind of the struggle for a lot of Bitcoiners, because the Bitcoin ethos is to not trust, to verify. And in many ways, it is almost opposite. Maybe not. Maybe it's not opposite. But what I was about to say is it was opposite to the spirituality ethos, because in what you're doing when you are connecting with your higher self is trusting yourself, trusting the universe. And there is no verification. There is no connecting with an intention and verifying that the outcome was what you wanted. It is quite the opposite. It's about trusting in the universe, trusting that whatever the outcome, that you're trusting in yourself. So for people who are in Bitcoin, and I think you and I are both this way, we tend to want to be able to verify with our rationality many things. But when you get into the more etheric realm, it can be difficult to do that, because rationality usually needs some kind of quantitative outcome in order to be able to say, yes, this thing that happened is what I wanted to happen. When you approach it from the spiritual aspect, it's deeper than that. It's deeper than being able to look at an outcome. Instead it is being able to look back. There's really no looking back as much as it is, how do I feel different? How does this thing in my life feel different? When you work through one of those layers of the onion, one of those patterns, those distortions, those fears that have been directing the actions in your life, and you look back and you're able to see how you release that fear, and you can see how and feel how different it feels in this moment, and how, okay, I don't need to take this action anymore because I'm not afraid of the outcome. In a way, yeah, you are rationalizing it, like I'm rationalizing now in describing it to you. But the quantitative result of healing small patterns like that is almost unknowable, because you release these fears, and the little actions, it's like the butterfly effect, the little actions, that the rights instead of the lefts that you take completely changes your life. So the don't trust, verify is, it's kind of a, it's opposite, kind of in that way. On the other hand, you could look at it as though you are verifying with yourself. You're verifying with your highest self. How is it? How is it that I'm doing when it comes to alignment with my highest self? Is the action that I am taking in line with a higher intention? Is it in line with a trust in the universe?
I mean, Kobe, I mean, it's an amazing conversation. It's opening up so much, but this is essentially the crux of what is so interesting. Bitcoin is a profound experience, and it is a spiritual awakening. And one of the nice areas of expertise that's growing for me that didn't exist before is the realm of Austrian economics, and I love it. It makes so much fucking sense. Oh my God, this is what economics is. Having sat through countless hours of, Keynesian fueled central bank bullshit that was part of my, higher education that I took at business school. And of course, Austrian economics wasn't mentioned, of course, swept under the carpet. But very simple. They talk about, human action, right? The individual. That is what drives economic outcomes. And a super simple, yes or no statement, right, is man wakes up every day. Do they pursue labor or do they pursue leisure? And on a fiat standard, going back to a comment you made before, it's absolutely no surprise that most of the decisions we ever make are something monetary related. Because, as people that have studied money will have looked, and anyone listening to this podcast, I'm sure, has got a good understanding of Bitcoin. For the last 50 years, we've been on a global fiat standard. The kind of data you can look at, great website, What the Fuck Happened in 1971. Why is it that the average house price is now 10 times average income, and 50 years ago it was 3 times average income? Why is it that real wages just haven't increased in 50 years? For the first time in almost ever, the middle class faces a worse standard of living than their ancestor. And it's because of the fucking money, right? The ability to print money, the Cantillon effect, the inflation we see everywhere. Labor or leisure? Well, in a inflationary environment in which your everyday money doesn't hold purchasing power over time, of course, your predominant focus is labor, right? Because you've got to pay the bills. And you can see now, even things like 50 years ago, the amount of dual income households versus now, like radically different. Like parents are both working now. They have less wealth. They go on fewer holidays. They have worse houses. They have worse lifestyles, right? That's because of the fiat paradigm. Flip that around and you've then got Bitcoin. Bitcoin standard. Well, what does that mean? It means your purchasing power is increasing over time. Okay, now you have somewhere to store your skills, energy, time, wealth, assets, capital, whatever you might want to call it. You can store it in Bitcoin. And that human action that one faces every day of labor or leisure, slowly but surely, the scales are tipping in a different direction. It's like, well, hang on a second. I've actually not got to exchange my time for money today. And you start to get delayed gratification because you have a savings tool that you can trust. Well, what is it that I actually want to do with my time? What is it that I like doing with my time? Unsurprisingly, people are spending more time with their partners, more time with their kids, having more babies. I don't know of many Bitcoiners that don't either already have kids or plan on having kids. This is very stark difference to, climate change, fear mongering, vegans that, can't think of anything worse than bringing a new baby into this world today that, is going to, that kind of mindset I joke slightly. I mean, there's obviously totally normal people out there that don't want to have kids or can't have kids. But you get my point, I think. The allocation is a concept I've been throwing around, I touched on before, that it is just out of curiosity. It's like, well, what do you do with your time? How do you allocate your time if you've solved the wealth problem? If you can be sure that you're always going to have some kind of capital resource to fall back on for any costs you have in the future, should you accumulate enough Bitcoin that goes up in purchasing power to such an extent over time that you don't have to consistently exchange all of your time for labor, you can increase the leisure angle. And then it's like, okay, well, what should be the primary driver of what you do with your time? And it's quite clear you don't need to make money with your time. And if you don't need to make money with your time, then what we do with our time radically alters. And just a final point to this being, I remember so clearly as a teenager, desperately trying to catch the attention of my parents and following the footsteps of the family and, multi-generational entrepreneurs with a family business. And I dropped like all sorts of classes that I quite enjoyed, such as history and latterly like music and art, English literature, in favor of like business studies. That's what I wanted to go and do because I could make money doing that. No one makes money as a musician. No one makes money as an artist. Drop it, drop it. You're not talented enough. You'll never make it. But that's like completely ignoring what happens with the creative process. And people aren't excellent musicians on day one or excellent artists on day one. They work at it. They work at it for years and years and years and years. And eventually they become good. So yes, it's a brilliant moment in time, Caleb, where it's like a new generation of higher consciousness adults suddenly have a position to express themselves in a way that wasn't possible because of adopting Bitcoin. And where that takes us, I don't know, but it's seriously exciting.
There's kind of an experiment that I want to kind of challenge us to try out right now. And with the um, with the model that everything comes from within, everything comes from an intention, it should then be understood that the money that we use is a reflection of an inner intention. And there is like an inner intention or an inner distortion that has then created the fiat paradigm that is all around us. And so, what I want to do is, and just kind of talk through this, and we have to rationalize a little bit, but I want to feel and then kind of subsequently describe what is the fiat paradigm? What is the internal distortion, the internal intention that creates the fiat world and the resulting money that represents it?
The resounding statement that's coming to mind initially is getting something for nothing. That is what fiat is. It's getting something for nothing. And what we see today is actually that manifested on an extraordinary scale, and it's accruing power into a smaller and smaller and smaller handful of people that have become extraordinarily wealthy beyond any comprehension we can imagine, whilst the vast majority become poorer and poorer and poorer. And it's through the ability to get something for nothing. Now, the process of getting something for nothing masquerades in all different types of outfit and guise and let's just say disguise you can think of. And what I mean by that is, like, you know, as Satoshi so brilliantly did, Chancellor on brink of bailout, right? So the media touts these experts as saviors, you know, like, oh, listen to the central banker, they're going to save us. Or, you know, the latest round of quantitative easing is it's for your own good. And you see articles like inflation's actually good. And it's gaslighting, like, on an extraordinary level, right? It's basically like, you're wrong, we're right, and you need to be happy about that fact. And so, what is that as an internal reflection? Well, it's I guess a part of human nature, isn't it? Like, who doesn't want something for nothing? I want something for nothing. Why the fuck not? Why wouldn't I want something for nothing? That just plays on one's self-interest to a kind of wonderful degree. But that's not reality. How do you get something for nothing? How do you actually do that? So ultimately, it's corruption, right? It's a corrupting instinct that brings zero value at the expense of everyone else, essentially. Yes, what an interesting question you ask, Caleb, because it's hard to say, isn't it, precisely what that would mean. But yeah, that's my first stab at it, I guess.
I think that's an excellent summation, is the term "something for nothing," because when you say it, what it stirs up in me is it sees all of the, and we've actually had conversations about this in the past. It stirs up in me seeing the something for nothing that we see everywhere, especially reflected on the internet with all of these YouTube personalities. And now the YouTube personalities have effectively become artificial intelligence. You know, they are quite literally going on AI and asking a computer what is going to get me the most quantitative results for the least amount of effort. And I think that is a great way to describe this idea of something for nothing. And the crypto bros have it too. I mean, essentially the concept is that I just want to be able to click a mouse and just watch my money grow and not have to do all of this stuff, right? So it's like there's this, if we look at it from the perspective of trust in the universe, which we talked about, trusting that there is an abundance, trusting that the universe, that God will take care of me, that there is inherently a love for me as an individual, and that no matter what I do, I will survive. And not only that, I will thrive. Like, I will thrive. Thrive is a loaded word. I will be okay. But I will be okay to the point where I will be okay with being okay. I don't need all of this stuff around me, but inherently, because I am a human being, who is born in a place of unconditional love and abundance, that I don't have to do anything to get that. So it's like we lost this trust in our higher selves. We lost the trust that we would be okay no matter what happens, no matter the curiosity that we explore, we will get what we need. And it probably won't look the same anymore. It might not look like a super big house or a fancy car. But when I look within, I'm content with what I have, the things that I have. It doesn't actually matter all this stuff that I have, because what I'm doing is just playing around in reality. If the world is like a game, if the world is like the Matrix, I'm just hacking the Matrix and enjoying my time doing it, enjoying my time exploring it. So I think that's the sense that we kind of lost. It's like I don't trust that I'm going to be okay without looking for some external action that I need to do. And I think, as you had mentioned, there's like this evolutionary desire to to want to expend as little energy as possible. And this is where the term doing nothing for something comes in. It's like, I don't really actually want to do this stuff. I don't actually in my heart want to go to work. I don't want to, like, I would rather spend time with my family. I would rather spend time creating things with them, following our genuine passions and creating things that, at the end of the day are valuable to other people. But that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because, we just want to play around. I think there's like this really deep forgetting of who we are and what we come from that has led to this doing nothing to get something back.
So when I listen to you talking about having faith in the universe and having true belief that I'm going to be okay, regardless of what happens, the universe got my back, I find that the larger the percentage of my net wealth becomes Bitcoin, the more I feel that. And I'm a big fan of the question: ask a man what he owns, not what he thinks. And this is a kind of, if you're not an investor, you won't necessarily care so much about this, but I can tell from what someone owns in their portfolio what they think. Far better than if someone sits there and spends 20 minutes telling me what they think, if that makes sense. And I personally feel like the more I'm able to buy Bitcoin, instead of owning, equities in a stock market or government bonds or leveraged real estate or, pretty much everything else you can possibly fucking own, right? Fiat currency. The more I'm able to just lean into the fact that, like, all you got to do is just buy and self-custody this thing properly, and it's got your back. Now, one step further is then the universe has actually already got your back. So I've still got some work to do to make that jump. But it's funny because the get something for nothing, who doesn't want that? Well, everyone wants that. But who can get that? Well, in reality, everyone loses in that system, in my view. And the reason for that is what is called proof of work. And this is one of the brilliant characteristics of Bitcoin that doesn't necessarily reveal itself immediately when, as for many people, you come for the gains and then you stay for the revolution, right? What is hard money? What does it mean if we have a money system free from government? Okay, wow. hang on, so this is just a savings technology. What, saving and investing are not the same thing? And honestly, it took me so long to work all this out. And basically, capital comes in many forms, right? So capital can be financial, but capital can also be skills, or it can be networks, or it can be friendships, it can be cultural. And capital is this phenomenally interesting thing you can study and nurture over time. And Bitcoin is capital. Bitcoin is also money, and money is a technology, and money is a form of capital. And how this all pieces together is so interesting. But ultimately, Bitcoin uses something called proof of work. So in order to get paid any Bitcoin as a Bitcoin miner, you have to go out and expend a whole ton of energy to compute what is the correct transaction to do this. So it's called the SHA-256 hashing algorithm. So all of those data centers out there that are using electricity, they're basically just playing a maths game all day. And whoever gets the question right gets paid in Bitcoin. And so you cannot get paid Bitcoin without doing the work. And the easiest analogy to this that I always like, which is why it's called Bitcoin mining, is because to mine gold, you've got to go and find it. And finding gold is really fucking hard because it's so scarce. And that's one of the reasons that gold became such a good money for us previous. In fact, money is the best form. Gold is the best form of money prior to Bitcoin because of its scarcity. And there's other forms of, there are other characteristics of money that are obviously important in terms of durability and in terms of being homogenous and in terms of being recognizable and all these different things. Where am I going with all this? When you get something for nothing, it just doesn't work in the real world. And that's where it's just such a complete failure of a system. And you mentioned crypto bros. Like Ethereum is the worst of the worst of the worst when it comes to this shit, right? Huge pre-mine. No one really knows who owns it. No one knows how many they're going to print in the future. It's building on quicksand. It is not the future of money. Yes, there might be some interesting technology companies that get built in it, but it is the last place I'll be putting my money. Forget it. Because they get something for nothing, right? That entire ecosystem is built on the same premise as what fiat currency is built upon, right? The guys that were able to bastardize what the gold price was based on selling extra paper claims as they created fractional reserve banking. Same thing, but it's Ethereum. Now I'm turning into a big old rant and becoming the Bitcoin maximus that I am, but it's it's a phenomenally interesting conversation.
Jake, we're getting close to our time here. So, but there's a topic that I really want to touch on, and I think we could probably do an
Yeah,
entire
let's
episode.
go for it. I've got time, so it's okay.
Okay. So the next subject that is really intertwined with this is rationality. If we look at Bitcoin, if we look at all money as an internal reflection, and if we see on one side, that on the fiat side, that money being a reflection of our desire to get something for nothing, to not have a trust that we're going to be okay if we follow our highest selves. And then we look at the Bitcoin side, and if we say that this money is a global standard, and this is, if we pretend that this is, we're 20 years into the future, or 100 years into the future, let's say, and we're now all operating on a Bitcoin standard, there are some people who didn't go through this process of genuine curiosity, going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, understanding that this money just kind of makes sense. There was like this level of rationality that was able to break down the fear-based barriers that exist around taking something that is so valuable to us in the terms of our fiat currency and putting it into something that the majority of the population just doesn't really understand, right? So basically what we did was leverage our rationality to dissolve fears, and that is a very expansive process, to the point where now, because we dissolved so many fears around fiat currency and letting go of it, because we just understood it. Um, and I guess what I'm getting at here is that there seems like there's still a place for quantifying and rationalizing our fears so that we can let go of them. Um, I heard something really interesting on a podcast, which is once we understand something, or maybe instead it was when we fear something, it's because we don't understand it. And I thought that was really profound, because when I feared Bitcoin, because there was a fear, right? There was a fear that I'm not going to buy that. If I buy that, I'll just lose all my money. It's going to collapse. It's not secure. When I feared putting my value into the Bitcoin network, it was because I didn't know, I didn't verify for myself through rationality that this was a secure element. And I think that it also came from a higher place, but I used my rational mind to help me. Well, I didn't use it to help me dissolve the fears. That's just what happened, right? The intention was just following something that I was interested in. But at the end of the day, my rationality around the subject helped me to dissolve it, dissolve the fear. So I'm curious what you think about rationality, and because you've been playing around with higher conscious as well, and dissolving fears through through energy work, through sessions. And we do have systems for rationalizing out of our fears. However, there are limitations with that, and we see those methods are like, I think the word is Socratic thinking, or like therapy. When you sit down with another person and you talk through your fears, and then you can hear how ridiculous they sound, and then maybe delve in deep to where they come from. But you're not actually for some people, actually, I would say probably for most people, these therapeutic sessions are very helpful. But the process of rationalizing them can still leave something to be wanted, because what you inevitably do is build a model around the fear. So let's just say, for instance, that you are deathly afraid of bats, which I don't like bats. So this is more my example. So I don't like bats. I think that they're really gross. But if I talk through that fear with somebody, the model that I'll build around it is, well, the likelihood of me interacting with a bat is very low because they're nocturnal. So I'm asleep for half when they're awake. The likelihood of me getting bit by a bat that has rabies or something is also very low, because they'll try to fly away from me. So I build these rational models that tell me that my fear, I don't need to worry about it because it's not likely to happen to me. But instead, the Bitcoin, or the decentralized consciousness version of that, would be to go deep, to feel that fear and not and not give it so much charge. It's basically to release it internally. So you have like this rational process, which clearly works, but you also have the more spiritual process. How is that contrast to you? How is that? How have you been discovering or playing around with that contrast? Have you? Maybe you haven't felt that difference yet.
Yeah, you were right when you said this could be a whole new podcast. Um,
Yeah,
so
for sure.
the analogy that's coming to mind is, um, the Bitcoin rabbit hole itself, or just from an investment perspective. Like, step number one: if you don't own any Bitcoin, you're short Bitcoin, and the worst possible position you can be in right now is to be short Bitcoin. So what's the first step? Well, you've got to get off zero. You've got to get some skin in the game. And that's what I advise to absolutely anyone and everyone that I ever meet in my life. It's like, yeah, I'm a big Bitcoin advocate. This is why, and you need to buy some. And generally speaking, people will be like, okay, cool. Where can I learn more? And I send them in a direction and off they go. What I find, and if you think about this, it happens all the time. I particularly like that phrase, skin in the game. And think of a horse race. And there's 20 odd riders, and one of them's wearing, a pink outfit, and they've got a good name. And you're like, yeah, for whatever reason, that's the horse I'm going to choose, and I'm going to put my $50 on that horse. And for the next 15 minutes, or however long the race takes, 5 minutes or whatever, you're just like an avid fan of this like one horse, and you watch it all the way around. And if it wins or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The point is because you had money on that horse, because you had skin in the game, you are inevitably intellectually much more engaged in the outcome. And in some ways, okay, you're not short Bitcoin. Now you've got off zero. Now you've got some skin in the game. It basically, you get prodded further down the rabbit hole. And in the same way, I think of intuition versus rationality. And what I've found is that I was basically short intuition, to use an investment phrase. I didn't even understand it was an option. And through the work that I have done, specifically with Sama, that has been highlighted in a brilliant way. So there is another option, and he talks through it as an operating system, right? So I run my iPhone on Apple iOS, but you could use Google Android, like they're operating systems, right? The point is there's a different way of thinking. How interesting. Okay, intuition. Wow. And so how do you live your life if you use intuition? What do you mean? You wait for your own mind to tell you what to do? That sounds fucking stupid. So, and if initially there's the skeptic within you, right? Just like, nah, that doesn't work. But maybe then, well, hang on, how did I even end up where I am today? And then you start to think about the fact, well, actually, look around us. This iPhone, that was once an idea. This house I'm in right now, this was once an idea. The car I'm driving was once an idea. Where do ideas come from? Well, they come from inside. They are intuition. And physical products and services around us are the manifestation of intuition. And that's your rational mind explaining to you actually how intuition is extremely valuable. And of course, through meditation, you can start to spend more time interacting with your higher consciousness. And it's a process. Absolutely, it's a process. But you start to you're no longer short intuition. Suddenly you've got off zero, and then you've got a bit more skin in the game. And then suddenly you're like, oh, hang on, this is really interesting. I want to learn more. And that's that's why we're on this podcast today. Okay, that this is a shared journey, if ever there was one, in a future in which we don't know where it's going to take us. But I'm fascinated by this idea of people being led, instead of with hyper rationality, they're being led by intuition based on a Bitcoin standard in an environment where they have more leisure than they had to focus on labor in the past. And what does that mean? And Bitcoiners are an early reflection, to use your word, of what the future world will look like. And generally speaking, Bitcoiners, they take care of their body, they value family, they have tend to have a fairly traditional conservative leaning, and hyper respectful, hyper resourceful, extremely productive people. Well, that's pretty fucking cool. And that's very, very different to the hyper fiat world, especially as you mentioned, logging online. Social media is a shit show of all these morons saying this is how the world should work. Look at how the COVID-19 scamdemic was actually played out, right? This coordinated global medical fascism that was in place in places that were supposed to be open, democratic, liberal society. Absolutely extraordinary manifestation of getting something for nothing in an environment where people control and others have nothing. And so, yes, what is rationality? Well, I need to find out more, and I'm learning more about intuition, and it's just so interesting to work through all this stuff.
Awesome. So I think to wrap up here, I want to go a little bit deeper into the phrase you used there, which I loved, which is put some intuitive skin in the game. So for someone, let's just say that there's somebody listening who is curious how to take the very first step, kind of out of the fear, out of the rationality, and they want to get some intuitive skin in the game. What would you say would be the most, to use a previous word, effective step for them?
I will give an example. So back in October, I was the MC for an event in Bali that was the Indonesia Bitcoin conference. And so it was my job to stand up on the stage in front of everyone at the start of the event and introduce the whole gig. And I just started working with Sama more actively just prior to that. And I had this very strong sense that I was going to evolve. So I'd been an MC before. I'd done some public speaking before. Specifically, I was the MC of Bitcoin Alive, which was an event held in Sydney last year. We're just about to have the 2024 version actually in a few weeks' time. And they've invited me back to be the MC again. But I'd never before really got on stage and hosted conversations and introduced people and whatever. So that was a hugely important moment for me. But I'd applied to Bitcoin Bali, and I got it's just volunteer, right? But got the call up, and they said, "Yeah, we love what you've done before, and you'd be great for us. So come along." And that morning of the conference, I had taken a small walk from the hotel, and I was doing a little meditation, and I guess that's the first step, right? If you want to get some intuitive skin in the game, is really lean into meditation. Just try it. Just try it. Sit alone with your thoughts and just see what happens. And all of the things that you think during that experience, that's basically you talking to your intuition. And whatever happens after that experience, the things you act on were probably the most powerful bits of intuition that happened in that experience in your meditation. But I was sitting in my meditation before this event. I was going, okay, actually, I'm just kind of going to just go with the flow. I'm going to see what happens here. Because normally my hyper rational mind, I'd be like prepping exactly like, okay, this person's coming on stage. This is their background. This is, my pre-rehearsed script that I'm going to write out and I'm going to read it off the book. And I just had this thing that came to me. It's like, actually, fuck that, Jake. Just, you can have your book in your hand with the most important notes in it, but just, you're going to get on stage, take a breath, and just see what comes out. And it was this extraordinary moment where I had to, I mean, obviously you're thinking on your feet, you're in front of an audience, right? Like, don't fuck it up. The pressure's on. But it felt right. And it wasn't rational. It wasn't rational to get on stage and not know what you're going to say. But I did it. And I got a heap of very, very favorable feedback over the 2-day event with my MC skills in between talks and panels and stuff. And it all came from that place of just trust what you're going to say is going to come up, is going to be the right thing. And even if you say the wrong thing, it was still meant to be said. And that example I share is something that came from intuition rather than from rationality. And so, yeah, just to recap, lean into meditation as it's like a superpower that we all have, but we don't know that we can use it. We don't even know we've got it. It is literally like reaching a new level of consciousness. It was always there. You just never tried to find it. And through that experience, you might then get moments where something speaks to you and just says, try doing that a little differently next time. Or why don't you try this approach? Or, I don't know how it will manifest in your life. So whoever's listening out there, I honestly, I don't know what impact this will have if you try this. But for me, it was really clear, like, Jake, just chill, man. Get on stage, and what you say, you were meant to say. And it worked an absolute dream. And with that comes confidence. And with that comes a belief that the universe actually does have your back. And that you've got the ability to get through these moments that previously that your rational mind would be anxiety and fear and all the rest of it. So I don't know if that makes sense, Caleb, but that would be
Absolutely.
that's my response.
Yeah, no, I think that's so accurate. What everything that you said, and yeah, start with meditation. Start with just taking some time for the highly rational. It probably makes sense to set a timer or an alarm and sit down for a specific amount of time, be it 10 minutes, and just sit and be with your thoughts. Sit and be in the present moment, which basically means that whatever the thought that comes up, it is probably a reflection of the past, which is not now, or it is a projection of the future, which is also not now. And when you can see those thoughts in this way, you begin to see them as separate from yourself, and actually really not being true. And even though, because something happened in the past, even your thoughts about it are not true because they aren't the actual event, and the future as well, because it hasn't even happened. So yeah, I think that's definitely the first step. And the other thing that I wanted that you kind of brought up as you were talking about your time on stage, it reminded me of similar times where I've talked in front of audiences and just felt comfortable letting it flow. And what I realized is that, or what I've realized through my journey now, is that we actually already do have intuitive skin in the game. We do act through our highest self, but we don't necessarily realize it. And in order to have a conversation about it here, there is a level of rationalization that we must do in order to communicate it with one another. But as we have gone through life, especially as kids, we have lived through our intuition before. It's not like we have been living through fear our entire lives, or even 100% of the time. There are times throughout the day where you are living through intuition. So for the highly rational, it would be trying to figure out what those times felt like during the day. what did it feel like, and what happened when I was living in my intuition, and what was the outcome? Like, was the outcome something that I was okay with? And naturally, the answer is always going to be yes, because if you were living through your intuition, then you would be okay with the outcome. Um, so yeah, knowing that there is hmm, that while there is a difference between living through fear and living through intuition, you can and do live through your intuition already. And if it helps you to try to figure out when those intuitive times come throughout the day, um, start to learn more about what that feels like so that you can start to grow that in your day to day.
Well, a few things spring to mind, Caleb, but of course we've lived with intuition forever. And it's why I really like the idea of like going back to being a child, and we had dreams and aspirations, and they were fantasy, right? Complete fantasy. But that's okay. Those are the kind of states of mind that I believe we want to try and foster as adults now. So, what does it look like when someone's sitting on a Bitcoin standard and trying to recreate moments of fantasy in their day? What creativity and inspiration will come out of that? Absolutely mega. And so how do we get into those states of mind? Well, maybe you can do lots of different physical exercise, right? You can use a yoga routine, or you can hike, or you could go jogging, or whatever the case might be. Meditation, or ice baths, or sauna. There's all sorts of different ways we can kind of alter our state. Drugs, different, like mushrooms perhaps, or smoking marijuana, getting drunk, like whatever you might choose to do. The point being is that the the sense of fantasy that one had as a child, that was our intuition. So it's really just a case of rediscovering that. And I think it's definitely possible. Um, and what's fun is I start to think through. I mean, certainly as an investor, I'm like, whoa, wouldn't it be cool if we could get a bunch of people who are already in a place where they've kind of solved the wealth problem. They do a ton of this kind of more mindset work and spiritual work, and then unleash them on the creative projects that they actually want to do. And you invest in the businesses they create. Wow. What would that portfolio of companies look like? And it would be very different to the fiat denominated venture capital world that we know of today. Um, and maybe they're not investment opportunities, right? Maybe that's already taking it one step too far in the rational mind to try and make money out of it. But all of history is littered with examples of great art being created because of capital that funded those artisans, right? And yeah, it's cool, right? You just go to Italy, right? You visit Florence, and you think about what was going on back in the Renaissance. Then it's private benefactors that were funding these absolute monster art projects. And there's all sorts of other areas of history where that kind of relationship is littered. So yeah, it's very cool, isn't it? I mean, who knows what the future has in store in that sense?
Jake, this has been an awesome conversation. We definitely have to do it again. Before we close out here, would you be able to kind of tell people where they can find you, get in touch with you, if they just want to interact?
Yeah, sure. Um, my website is mrjakewoodhouse.com. It's in need of a revamp, to be honest. It's just a landing page. Ask for an email in exchange for a list of Bitcoin books that I share with people. I was very active on Twitter until just a couple of months ago, again at Mr. Jake Woodhouse. And otherwise, I've been messing around on Noster. So if anyone hasn't spent time on Noster, I highly recommend checking it out. I think it dovetails with what Bitcoin is extremely well, and could easily be the future of the internet that we actually use. So those would be the few places I'd send people. Otherwise, yeah, my email, jake@mrjakewoodhouse.com. So thank you very much for having me on, Caleb. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.